Chapter 7. Ryan. I'll never forget it. For the rest of my life, I'll never forget it. Outside, the Saturday sun stroked the garden. My mother said something to my stepfather and gave him a tired smile. And on the phone, this guy described how his 16-year-old daughter's heart had stopped. He hadn't meant to phone me. Victim support were the ones who looked after this sort of thing. But he'd rung about my bloody jacket. There was this black and silver one with Tara's things. He'd been going to give it to the hospital people to pass on to the cops. Then he'd wondered if maybe it was mine. I said it was. Then I swallowed and asked, "How is she?" His words came out clotted, like someone else was speaking through his mouth. She had a severe cardiac arrhythmia. Her heartbeat got so irregular it started to shut down, about 12 o'clock. My arms and legs spasmed. My eyes bulged and my mouth stretched. I jerked the phone away as if it had clawed me. "Oh, shit, no." Someone inside my head was gasping. "Oh, shit, no." Tara. Something paused. It was like a big engine you've got so used to you never notice it working. Then it switches off and whispers into silence. I drifted high above emptiness. Then very gently, I began to fall. Ryan. On the phone, her father's voice kept coming. She was alive. The monitors on the ICU machines had started beeping. The nurses were there in 5 seconds to give her resuscitation, and she'd responded straight away. I sat shuddering and gasping, the receiver in my hand. Mum stuck her head through the door. "Ryan, have you seen—" "Ryan? What's happened?" She snatched the phone away from me. "Who is this? What's going on?" She listened while I hugged myself and tried to breathe properly. Then she said, "Mr. Gower, it's Catherine O'Carroll, Ryan's mother. We're all so sorry. Please, I know we don't have any right, but can we talk to you sometime?" I glanced up. Mum's face was pale. So were her knuckles where she gripped the phone. She spoke again. "I understand. We don't want to cause any more hurt. But if we could just tell you face to face." Another pause. Then, Yes. Thank you for listening." She hung up, said, "He's going to think about it," and put her arms around me. John came in then, stared at the two of us, and Mum told him what had happened. Afterwards, I made it to my room and lay curled up in a ball on my bed. And just like that first night, I heard myself bawling. Severe cardiac arrhythmia and resuscitation will cause blood pressure changes which may damage the blood-brain barrier. The patient must be closely monitored and properly sedated. Ryan. Later, Mum made me eat some dinner. Then she and John sat me down and we watched a DVD. They hardly ever watch DVDs. They read, or else Mum studies for this office skills course she's doing. But tonight, we all watched, though I didn't really take anything in. Usually on Saturday night, I'd be out with Ash and Vince, talking about the parties we were going to crash and never really getting past the talking. This Saturday, I was home with my folks and a DVD. If I could have spent Saturday nights like that forever, it would have been just fine by me. A central venous line, inserted in the patient's arm to supply fluids, was continually checked, as was the saline drip that maintained her salt levels. Her head was kept aligned with the spine to prevent any twisting and spinal damage. There were no further complications from the collapsed lung. The broken rib and the lung wound seemed to be healing. It was agreed that the lung drainage tube should remain in place as long as the patient was being ventilated. Ryan. I slept half the night. When I was little, Mum used to take me to a park, so she could get away from my father, I reckon. There was this statue of kids who could fly, and I used to wish I could do that too. Just fly away and leave everything behind. I wished it again now. About 4 a.m, I got up and stood by the window. The shrubs and lawn were black and silver in the moonlight. A darker patch of shadow moved, and next door's cat flowed over the side wall. I pictured Central Hospital, where a girl lay while her body decided if she'd live or die. She couldn't die. Not while so many people were willing her to live. She couldn't. I squeezed my hands into fists and begged her inside my head. Come on. Come on. Tara. Time had passed. I don't know how much. There'd been a panic, something beeping, people hurrying, voices calling somewhere near or far. It was over now. I kept drifting, but I wasn't falling anymore. Somehow I'd turned around. Ryan. I went to Taekwondo on Sunday morning. We have it in a hall that the local play centre use, so there's all these little kids' art and stuff up around the walls, like explosions in a paint factory. Nobody said anything about the accident. Greg, the instructor, never lets us talk anyway. Mouth closed, mind open, he says. We did speed work and pad work. The hall echoed with fists and feet whacking into pads and voices yelling, "Ha!" I felt some of the knots inside me loosen. Good, Ryan, Greg said as we stretched and warmed down at the end. You okay for Tuesday? I realised then that he knew. Greg never imagines that anyone might not come to a TKD practice. I said yeah, and realised too that for the first time I was looking past the next couple of hours. Back home, I told Mum I'd ring Ash. She was pleased. So was he. Hi, mate. Vince and I were planning to call you, see if you wanted to go down to McDee's. So we went, the three of us. I was shit scared people would look at me or start whispering who I was, but nobody did. They just seemed to be getting on with their own lives. I didn't eat much. Vince was pretty twitchy. What are you going to tell the cops? He asked once. I already have, I said, and he stared. I waited, but he didn't say any more. You bloody... I felt the words begin to swell in my throat. Then the same tiredness, the same I just can't be bothered feeling I'd had with the police sergeant swept over me again. I told them it was my fault. Vince looked at the ground. He seemed keen to get away after that, and Ash had already used up his week's ration of words, but I was glad I'd come, I suppose. I worked on some economic stuff I should have done a couple of weeks back. I was getting on for dinner time when I heard a car pull up. I went to check the window, and there was this dark blue hatchback I'd never seen before, parked in our drive with someone getting out. Mum, I said. She joined me at the window, and I felt her go tense. He'd shaved, but he still looked shattered. The skin of his face seemed loose, as if he'd lost weight suddenly. We stood watching for a second. Then Mum opened the door to Tara Gower's father.